Welcome to Papa's Workshop. Well, the sign is finally done, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Now, in the last couple of videos, I've shown a few of the steps on what it took to be able to make this sign. But today, what I want to do is just take a few minutes and show you what it looks like from the concept of a paper drawing to the completed sign. It's pretty amazing, and I had a great time doing it. And I want to show you how I did it today from the beginning all the way to the end. So let's get started. A day in the shop with Papa and Papa's Workshop. To support my channel, please go to patreon.com/Papa's Workshop. In today's video, I'm going to show from beginning to end how I created this absolutely beautiful sign. My son designed this sign from beginning to end. And when he finished, he printed it out in a tile format, taped it all together, and brought it to me and said, "Gee, Dad, can you help me make this sign? This is a project for a friend at work, and he wanted to be able to get a little bit of help with it." So I wanted to give you a look at the finished sign up front so you see exactly what it looked like. Now, there's a lot of elements that make up this sign because there's really no right angles at all. Everything has a lot of curves, arches, and the mitas, not one single 90-degree on here. But it was a very fun project. I've done a couple of videos that show some specific elements, but today I wanted to be able to go through quickly and show you all of the different elements that made up making this sign. The first thing that I did is brought this whole entire sign into the Carve Pro. And at that point, I was able to get it sized to the correct dimensions that we needed to be able to cut it out. And I've highlighted the actual outline of this sign, and that's what I wanted to be able to carve. So I set up the tool paths to be able to do that. And once I had the profile tool path set, I just saved it, and then it was time to be able to carve it. And of course, when you do this, we're cutting all the way through the material. That's a normal window that pops up, and this is a preview of what it was going to look like. So from there, it was time to head over to the CNC machine to be able to carve it out. I'm using a CNC for Newbie, a new carve to be able to carve this. I have it all set at my XY 0 position. I've previewed it so I know exactly what it's going to carve, and now it's time to go ahead and begin the carving process. Now I'm using a 1/4 inch downcut bit to be able to carve it, and I'm using the ramping feature to be able to slowly enter into the wood and be able to carve this. Now it still will take several passes to be able to do it, but this is the first step. I need that backer board to be able to build upon everything else. One thing I want you to notice also is I'm using the glue and tape method to be able to hold this big board down. There are no clamps at all holding this, and I'm using a 1/4 inch downcut bit to be able to carve it, and it's working great. So I really encourage everyone to use the glue and tape method. Now in the previous video I showed the ramping feature in Easel Pro, but I wanted to show you that same feature here in the VCarve Pro as well. It works extremely well, and it's something I think everybody should be able to try out. So the project now is just about finished, and from there I wanted to flip it over and get the keyhole slots done. And for this I moved over to the Xcarve, and I'm using the Easel app for the keyhole generator to be able to do this. Now I'm cutting these keyhole slots 0.26 inches deep, and I'm making them 1.5 inches long. I'm putting 2 of them 1.5 inches apart. That way they'll be able to hang nice and straight, and it won't tilt left and right. From there, I moved over to the laser, which was the Fox Alien riser laser, and I engraved my logo onto the bottom, and that will complete the back of this sign. Now it's time to flip it over. I've got some letters to be able to print, but first we're going to do a test carve to make sure that everything works smoothly. Using the 60-degree V-bit worked out extremely well. That looks great. Now I'm going to go ahead and put some the Aura Mask 813 on it, and I'm going to see how that carves. Now this did not carve quite as well as I expected. There are some areas where the Aura Mask 813 is lifting up, but for the most part, it's doing well. I did have to take a utility knife and clean it up a little bit before I spray painted it, but all in all, it worked out very satisfactory. The letters are all done at this point. The carving is finished, and again, I'm using the glue and tape method to be able to hold it down. And I wanted to be able to show this little bit of a segment because it holds really, really well. I was having a rough time finding a place that I could grip it and lift this up. And I only had 2 strips of tape holding it, but it finally released and I was able to lift it off of the board. Now I moved over to the laser again to cut out the royal flush, and I showed a whole video on how I did this whole entire process. But the laser did work extremely well. It carved very fine detail and it made a perfect stencil to be able to do the required spray painting. Once the laser was finished, I just peeled off the areas that needed to be painted so I could expose that and was able to paint it. The setting that I used was 30 inches per minute with 60% power on the laser, and this was an absolutely perfect stencil. Now it was time to take it over and do some spray painting. I also had cut out my fleur-de-lis at the same time, so I was going to go ahead and paint it along with my royal flush. Now spraying the royal flush does not take a lot of paint. It's a very light coat. I think I used 2 very light coats to be able to get the coverage. The fleur-de-lis, the most important part was to get the edges and make sure that everything was painted black. After it was dry, I peeled off all the masking and took it over to the bandsaw. And I know I could have cut this out on the CNC machine just as easy, but I like to be able to use the tools in the shop, and this is, quite frankly, a little relaxing. Then it was a quick trip to the sander, and I wanted to sand the edges all the way around, make them nice and smooth. After that, I went ahead and painted the edge black, and that just put the finishing touch on the royal flush. No poker game is complete without having some poker chips, so I set up the laser again to cut the stencil for my poker chips. Now on this one, I set it up where it was much easier to be able to cut the outline and then be able to spray paint it. I did not like the results just with the laser doing the solid fill. I decided just to be able to cut it on the line only and spray paint it. Now the very low setting on the laser makes for a perfect stencil. And then from there I just peel off the masking where I want to be able to spray paint it. And the nice thing about this, with this power setting being very low, it cuts exactly the way it needs to be, peels directly off, and just look at the results. I don't even have to press this back down. The edges are completely sealed and it is ready to be able to take over and spray paint. I don't have to do anything else with this at all. The results speak for themselves. Just look at that. That's a perfect stencil. After painting this nice solid black, it was back to the bandsaw just to cut these out. And yes, I know you're going to say I could have used a laser to cut it out. And yes, I could have. But what's the fun of that? Now let's move over and get the letters carved. And I'm back at easel and I'm going to carve out a test of my letters to make sure that they fit and are sized exactly as they need to be. Now I'm just using a scrap piece of wood for this. Now along the way, I did run into some problems that I have never experienced before. On this letter, it started carving and it really didn't look good at all. And I heard a little vibration. My first thought, wow, the brushes are going bad. But that wasn't the case. I've only got 100 hours on it. Actually, the bit broke inside the collet. Never had that happen before. But new collet, new bit, and I was back to carving. Now that I've had a successful carving of the letters, it's time to go ahead and laminate the copper onto the MDF. To do that, I used a Wellwood contact cement, and for this you put a good even coat of the glue onto both surfaces, onto the copper and onto the MDF. Now oftentimes MDF will require 2 coats, and in this case it did. I needed 2 coats of the glue onto the MDF and only 1 coat onto the copper. From there, you let this completely dry, and then you go ahead and stick it together. Now that that's finished, let's get over to the Carve. I have it secured to the wasteboard with the glue and tape method, and this is going to carve really nice. First thing I want you to notice, I'm using the ramping feature in Easel Pro to be able to cut this copper. This copper sheet is actually 20 thousandths of an inch thick, so it's not very thick, and it's actually fairly easy to be able to cut through. Now, as this nearing the completion of this letter, I wanted you to be able to take a look at it and just see how sharp and crisp this letter is. This turned out far better than I had hoped for. I have all the various components cut out now. The next step in this process is to cut those very thin strips. I need 1 set of strips for that inner border to be 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch, and then I need the outer border is going to be 3/8 of an inch by the 1/4 inch thick. The nice thing about it, I had my son over helping, so I didn't even need a push stick. He was able to pull those little thin strips right out from the saw, and that was great. From there, once all these were cut, we just spray painted all of them, and from there, while the paint was drying, it was back over to the laser to be able to create the stencils for the scrolls. And once the scrolls were all done with the stencils, we spray painted it and then just peeled off all of the masking. And with that part done, now it's time to start to assemble everything. And to do this, I started with the outside edge and put that border around it, and then we worked in toward the middle and put in the poker chips, the royal flush, and of course, all of the letters. But look at the scrolls. Those turned out absolutely beautiful. I couldn't resist laying everything out just to see what it was going to look like. But as far as the border, we glued in the corner pieces first, and with all of the straight edges, went ahead and cut those to fit and glued them in position. The last part's the hard part, that arc that goes at the bottom and this curve that goes at the top, both on the outer part and that inner part. That took a little bit of work to be able to get just right, but with the full-size drawing to be able to work with, it still was not that difficult to be able to do. I did use a pen nailer and glue to hold it in position. And now, here's a look at the finished sign. Everything is glued in exactly the way it needs to be. All of my arcs are glued in, and I think this curve down at the bottom turned out absolutely fantastic. It was great to be able to have the full-size plans to be able to work with. That definitely makes it a lot easier for a project like this. I want to thank everybody for watching the video today, and I hope you learned a few things along the way. If you liked the video, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there in the corner, and please hit that notification bell so you won't miss out on any of the videos that I'm uploading. And by the way, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the video and what videos would you like to see, because I've got a whole bunch planned, but I'd like to be able to get your input also so I can do some videos that you're interested in seeing. So until next time, I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in whatever project that I'm working on next.